Nice to
We're
meet
gonna
you.
get an introduction of everyone pretty soon, but if you're ready, we're gonna start with prayer from Pastor Lisa.
Okay.
God, thank you so very much for this privilege to gather and to come together to do your work. We ask that you would give us the wisdom and knowledge and discernment to be successful. It's in your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Lisa. Now we're gonna go right to Reverend Redrick. We know that you have a tight schedule. We're blessed that you are able to fit us in. You're in quite
I don't like to
demand.
use that word fit in. You are a priority too. It's just that there was a scheduling I could not adjust. So not a fit in.
All right, all right, all right. So we talked about topics that we wanted to do as a panel discussion. So if you would go ahead and set that up based on what you and I were talking about, its importance and relevance to police brutality.
Okay. Let me just share with you some work that we are presently working on. On Monday, the clergy will be gathering out front of the Charlotte Mecklenburg County Government Center to protest the very things that you're talking about, the excessive use of force by our police department in particular, the use of tear gas, which has been outlawed by the Geneva Protocol. So we're going to be talking about those things. We will be supporting Councilman at Large Winston Braxton as he is going to put before the City Council a proposal to defund the militarized weaponry that the police department has. So if you're available to come out, we will be arriving at 9 a.m. for the press conference to begin at 10. We will have a visual arts presentation for you, and we're calling it the Clergy Die-In. So we are there to not only send a verbal message, but we're also there to send a visible message that enough is enough, number one. The time is now to end the policing that Black and brown people experience on a daily basis, the shoot first, ask questions later, the incident in Minneapolis with George Floyd, a police officer using a method of restraint that is not trained or approved by any police department throughout the U.S. So we are here to make that awareness, and we are going to keep talking until Charlotte is no longer using that type of force, and especially during the time when our citizens are out peacefully demonstrating, because we have the right to do. The First Amendment gives us the right to speak our voice, speak our concerns in a orderly and peaceful manner. And when we do that, we should not expect, anticipate, or be intimidated by the police department arriving with plastic bullets or pepper spray.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you for that update, and we will share the word from alternative avenues to let people know that that's coming up, if that's okay.
Oh no, I want you to share the information.
Okay.
We'd like to have you present. I will be talking about it today with
The senator?
our Senator Alexander at 3:30, which we are prepping for that as we speak now.
Yes.
So look forward to hear more information about that. Look forward to just seeing how the clergy of all faiths, so clergy not one denomination, but our Muslim brothers, our Jewish family, our Christians of every denomination are gathering together in one voice to say enough is enough. And our white clergy in particular are owning the responsibility of making that statement as well.
Amen.
So I look forward to your audience, you and your family, if you're able. We will be social distancing and we will be masked.
Okay,
So please come out and join us.
okay, okay. Well, you and I had briefly talked about the origin of police brutality and its relevance to uh, racism, and we also talked about the vigilante police and its coveting the 21st century lynching and how historical that is. If you could speak a little bit about on those areas.
I surely can. We talked about its origin. Its origin is born out of slavery. Once uh, enslaved Africans were free, they needed another tool to suppress and oppress. And one of the ways that they did was instituting the type of police force. Most of the members of the police force are those who served with the Confederate, who were a part of the slave owners, and that has continued this day. So, you know, our police officers have just evolved into what a 21st century lynching looks like. So it stems from slavery. Even our mass incarceration is built on the backs of slave codes. If you were caught on the street at sundown, if you looked at a white woman, if you were on the same side of the street, if you didn't step off the side of the street, all of those were used as mechanisms to arrest you, to put you back in the field to do free labor.
Uh-huh, yes, indeed, and I was really captured by the concept of coveting 21st century lynching.
Yes.
Could you go on
The
that?
21st century lynching does not have to be hanging by a noose, although they still use those tactics. During the vigilante, as what happened to Ahmaud, knee on the neck, as they did with George Floyd, shooting you while in your home, in your car, while you're shopping. All of those are forms of 21st lynching. Lynching can also take place in your job when you are qualified for a position and don't get hired. So, you know, we can 21st century give lynching a 21st century look, and it will be any way that it seeks to suppress people of Black and brown origin.
Mm-hmm. And you already gave a good example of the importance of prayer and cultural awareness as a way for alternative avenues and other organizations like ours to develop strategies to make a positive difference. You already gave that by mentioning the forum that's coming up, the press conference that's coming up on Monday. Could you talk a little bit more about it? And we're taking notes. Alternative Avenues wants to be about it rather than just talking about it. So organizations
Most
like
importantly,
ours.
we want to be able to show up at the polls during early voting. We want to be able to support voting by absentee ballot. We also want to be able to have the courage to vote those who may have voted for to put in office that didn't do what we wanted them to do, to be able to vote them out at the same time. So
Okay.
voting is key.
Voting is key.
Attending your county commission meetings, your city council meetings, to send a message that you care about the policies that they are about to implement, that you are involved in the city. If we don't show up, then the city thinks that it's okay with what they do. The county thinks so, the state thinks so, as well as our national leaders. And voting change to reach to the top begins on the local level. So we must show up. We must show up during our primary as well as our general election.
Okay, okay. That is a lot for us to consider, And we want to take a moment and just give a little tiny background on how Alternative Avenues got into all this, and then we want to open up to all of our participants today that are zooming in and also in our headquarters. This is Minister Paula, founder and executive director of Alternative Avenues Through the Arts Incorporated, with you today. We've had our first filming with Owl Media, television production company, who's also affiliated with Channel 21, Public Access, yes. We've had our first filming, and we introduced what we want to do in the community. We want to reach families who are grieving from all that's going on, families who are grieving from not being able to take care of finances, the death of loved ones, so forth. Families who are grieving emotionally and spiritually and needing counseling. Families that need to transition in from paying exorbitant rents to owning their own property. Owning property is key to that. So now we've been given an opportunity to do this panel discussion today on something that's even more urgent. So that's an introduction for us today. So right now we want to get our panel discussion going. The first thing that we talked about was the police brutality and the origin of it historically. Is there a question on the floor that someone would like to ask? How do you feel about that? What has been your awareness as far as police brutality actually being stimulated from racism? Anybody?
I could start.
This is Dave Farmer, is one of our board members. He's our secretary. I'm sorry, I was supposed to introduce everybody. Introduce yourself.
No problem. My name is David Farmer. I'm a concerned citizen, parent, husband, city worker, Freemason, DJ, and secretary for Alternative Avenues Through the Arts. To answer Minister Paula's question about police brutality, first of all, I like to say that I'm in favor of law and order. Okay, I believe we need that in our community, but we need for this to be progressive. We need for this to be for everyone, inclusive of everyone. So when it comes to police brutality, for me, and I'm speaking from my personal views, no other organization, I believe that current laws are not always written to benefit the citizens that it's supposed to help protect. So we must make sure that these laws include everyone and all of our citizens, not just black and brown, but all of our citizens. And that's what I believe that's not happening right now, and that's why we have the brutality that we have right now, because we're not actually we're not considered in some of the actual decisions that are being made. We're basically left out, you know, when it comes to actually being respected, you know. So for me, I just believe that we have to make sure that the law, first of all, we have to understand the law, even though it may not be written for us. We have to understand it, we have to interpret it, and we have to make sure that it's progressive for everyone.
That's a good position, and I think that what Reverend Redrick suggested, that one of the strategies for us to impact strategies that are going to be positive change is to be involved with the council, vote how important it is for us to be a part of the primaries, and how important it is for us to make our own selves aware of who's in government, who our representatives are, and the only way we can find out is to be a part of the council meetings and so forth. Reverend Redrick, could you mention again those advocacy meetings that we should be a part of and be attending
Well,
council meetings and
I'm
so
sure,
forth?
I'm sure I'm able to do that. Anytime there's a city council meeting, anytime there is, and I'm talking about the large meeting, anytime there is a Mecklenburg County Commissioners meeting, you need to be there. And right now, because we are social distancing, they're still not meeting in person. So you're able to go out online and find when the meetings are and meet via Zoom. So it still gives you even a better opportunity to participate in government action. We do know that a lot of times the decisions are made already before we get there, but however, the community still needs to show up and voice their opinion so that the leadership that we voted for understands what we approve and what we disapprove. And to the gentleman who spoke about the laws, yes, we do need to know the laws, but what we also know is that when those laws were put in place in 1865, we were not considered whole human beings. We were considered as three-fifths and property. And so if you look at the condition of our country today, make America great again, is the thought process. And we're here to say that America was great when it was built because we built it, and we are going to make America great again within the last 3 years, and it seems like 8 under the current administration whose name will remain nameless. We must show up and vote. And I think that if we understood that our vote has power, more people will feel apt to go vote than to stay at home. And so the large part of our job as a community is to be in front of everyone that you see. First, ask the question if you are registered to vote. If they're not, get them registered. When we have early voting, you can register to vote and vote on the same day. If we are doing the mail-in ballot, and we'll be finding out more information about that to share about the mail-in ballot to get that out to you. Also, for those who may be returning citizens from being incarcerated, know that as long as you have completed your parole, you are eligible to register and vote. Many of our citizens are not aware of that, and they are left out of the voting process when they can take advantage of it.
Very good
I hope that
info.
answers some of your questions.
Oh, yes, very good info, especially about our incarcerated returning into citizenship. Is there anyone else who would like to, any of our Zoom-in participants that might want to weigh in on this part of the panel discussion?
I would say specifically as it relates to kind of some of the history.
Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. My name is Jerome Michael. Just as you mentioned, I think the description of being a concerned citizen right now is pretty apt, right? But I would say, in terms of like the history, right, associated with it, none of that's a surprise. Something that I've always been kind of personally aware of. The thing, for me personally, as of late, is trying to get kind of more people to kind of understand some of that history. And I think that's some of the challenge, specifically when you get beyond even your own race, right? There are going to be some who are not as kind of familiar with it within my own race, but then that conversation actually is a little more interesting, right? And potentially has the ability to be even more enlightening for folks who, quite frankly, never really wanted to know about it, didn't know about it, right? Or kind of refuse or kind of actually reject that premise, right? And just as, just to be completely honest with you, so some of these conversations, besides, individually, have actually happened, and for me professionally, I think for the first time in my life, right? I can't speak for what anyone else has actually been through, but it was always kind of taboo, right, to have these type of conversations sometimes in certain corporate settings. And now I actually find myself actually having these conversations in the exact places that I never thought I would, right? And the interesting piece, and one of the dynamics there is before I actually, exert influence, right, at kind of broader levels in the organization, I start with my team. And right now, since I'm relatively new to the group and everything that happened with the economy, I haven't been able to build my team to kind of reflect from a diversity perspective, our communities. So let's say, I actually inherited a team where all of my subordinates are actually white.
Wow.
Right. And as recent as Thursday, I believe it was, right? Here I am, again, a black manager, leading a conversation on race and police brutality, and in front of a group of all white subordinates.
Wow.
Wow.
And
Look
a
at
lot
God.
of people who are in that position, the first thing they're thinking about, right, is how do I actually navigate that? Because I'm still trying to weigh, right, disseminating certain information and to make sure there's a change at the same time, making sure, right, I'm not being perceived to be forcing something, right, on a group of people where they say this is not the time nor place to come.
You were handling that very well, Jerome. Proud of you, baby.
You was about to give us a history lesson.
No, and,
Is that the same?
and I apologize if I was getting a little too verbose, but
Okay.
I just wanted to give like some context in terms of what I was about to say and some of the things that I've just been kind of doing personally, and it was just kind of interesting because I did, at first, I kind of had a little bit of that internal struggle, right? And where I was just kind of like, hey, at what point, do I bring this up, right? Because I was actually waiting, for someone maybe to bring it up. Hey, there's riots, there's all of these things. Jerome, is there something you want to say? So I was kind of waiting to see if anybody was going to bring it up, but no one would bring it up, right? And I was like, you know what? I have a responsibility, that's much bigger, right, than just a paycheck that says I just can't be silent, right? I can't act like, if everyone just doesn't say anything, right, and kind of let it be, then it's okay, right? And shame on me if I would have been in that position and didn't take that time to, actually to address and kind of have some of those conversations. And the whole irony in it was it actually wound up being one of the best, I think, team building exercises we actually had.
Wow.
Even though obviously that wasn't the intent, right?
Wow.
It was raw, it was real, it was emotional. But you can see like
Good, Rashidi.
where it felt a little bit different because you can tell like they wanted to do something.
I wanted to respond to Jerome just quickly. Your point that you were making about not being silent, I think is one of the strategies that we should incorporate into our focus for making sure that we are being a part of positive change. If you're not already speaking out and being an activist as best you can, that's something we need to do. We got to. Not be silent. So I think that is very important of what you said, and it lends to, it's relative to one of the strategies that Alternative Avenues needs and will put out to others, to help others be a part of being a part of the solution rather than another problem or creating another tragedy.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the points I was, getting to was, ultimately to tie in, right, to the original question that you actually put out there, right, was in terms of the history. And the reason where I was going is to speak into the importance of people actually understanding it, because if they're not, a lot of people perceive it as random, right? It's like, well, there's no correlation in their mind, right? It's like, oh, ultimately, you can say this is happening, and why are you ultimately just focusing on black people when this could have happened to someone else, right? Because they don't know the history and they don't know the statistics. So to them, it comes off as completely random, right? So there's a lot of those, right? Because the first thing they asked me was, well, what can I do, right? And the first thing we talked about was, awareness, education, of the history and the current statistics, right? Because they'll fly by something and they're here, they'll say, oh, it's really not as bad as black people are actually making it seem. Actually, more white people overall, when you just look at absolute numbers, have actually been victims, right? But they're not taking the time to kind of hear, well, wait a minute, when you actually look at the stats, and they're talking about the likelihood, right, and the percentage as opposed to an overall number, right? It's like, how do you use a particular stat, so to speak, to your advantage that people may not be smart enough to kind of dig into, right? Same thing they do when they say, well, what about black on black crime? And they have no clue, right, that violence crime, whites are likely to kill whites and blacks are likely to kill blacks, right? It's interracial instead of interrelational, right? So one of those things but you never heard of white on white crime, right? Kind of spoken of as this subset in its own, code of violence, so to speak, right? So, again, not to kind of go off on track here, but it's those type of things, right? We're having conversation where it's like, hey, like ignorance isn't bliss. Like you can no longer like plead the ignorance case. Like you have a certain awareness now. Now, do you have a certain amount of responsibility that you actually feel to get educated on the history of it to kind of see how that's actually still relevant today, right? As opposed to, again, just saying, it's completely random. It's not part of systematic, inequality and racism, etc.
Thank you, Jerome. To update our audience, we've had a couple of our participants that maybe had to leave. I think Ms. Stevens had another meeting. I'm not sure if Reverend Redrick is still with us and or Pastor Lisa. Let's check on them.
I haven't gotten word back from them, so
Okay.
they may have moved on.
All right. Well, the next question that we had set up from Reverend Redrick was talking about vigilante police and what that means, and tying that into our panel discussion today. When Reverend Redrick and I were talking, I made the comment that it's like Zimmerman, who shot the young boy that had the Skittles. Trayvon Martin. So I'm not sure if the recent tragedy wasn't actually a shooting. What's that gentleman's name?
Ahmaud Arbery.
Okay.
George
In
Floyd.
Brunswick, Georgia.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was a security guard that and his son that was bothering him, or if it was a
He was an
licensed
ex-sheriff.
policeman.
He was an ex-sheriff. He was part of the actual, I guess you could call it, police force. But he was an ex. So that would be.
So he was off duty.
No, he didn't. He doesn't even work there. He retired.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So that would be exactly what you were saying also.
So he was taking the law into his own hands.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what describes the vigilante police. Let's talk about that a little bit. How do we feel about that? Anybody want to weigh in?
It's
Historic.
This one is it's terrible. In addition to that, right, it's still is so selective, and that's the thing, right? It's like, okay, we're policing the neighborhood, we're picking up the slack and things like that, but ultimately, what they, one thing I actually caught, right, how they were talking about how Ahmaud actually went into like a vacant house, right, and there have been robberies, so that's the reason why. But I don't know if anyone caught how they actually talked about a lot of people in that neighborhood actually went into that same house, right, of a different color, kind of, et cetera, and I haven't heard about them same people actually addressing any of those others because there were an increase in crime, so to speak, in that area, right? So if it's it's interesting that you know we have an issue with the people in authority who are actually supposed to be doing the work, but then you have vigilantes who are doing just as bad, if not worse, and it's actually compounding the problem.
Right.
And that's extremely frustrating and disheartening.
Yes, indeed.
The media outlets paged it. They investigated and they stated that the law to police the neighborhood, I guess you could call citizens arrest, they didn't even follow that protocol. You know what I'm saying? So you could just move that, you know, citizens arrest and policing the neighborhood out of the way, because that didn't happen. That's not what they were doing. Because if that was true, then again, the others that was in that building, why weren't they treated the same way? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and it was a recording of that house. So I'm pretty sure they have recording, don't you believe, of the others that was in that house?
They do, and ultimately also talking about how the owner actually had the footage and was able to see the people who did that, and determined there was nothing going on there, and the reason why he didn't call the formal authorities himself.
Yeah, and I don't even believe that they had a lot of police information of any break-ins in that area. Just listening from the media, and my wife is actually from the Brunswick area, so she actually has some family around there, and I don't think they had any reports of any break-ins. So you can't say that there was a lot of break-ins if you haven't reported it.
And with the most recent tragedy that we had with George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there were 4 police officers that were involved with that. I don't know if you got the latest information, but one of them was charged with 3rd-degree murder, and the other 3 have been arrested and charged, from what I understand. The bond has been set at like $750,000, but in that situation, you could clearly see that they were police use their own discretion in certain situations, and it's funny to me that the discretion that is always used is, you know, I'm fearing for my life, so I have to handle this situation in a way in which I'm, you know, fearing for my life, when in all actuality, you're supposed to be here to diffuse the situation. You're supposed to be here to police the situation, calm everyone down, get it to a point where it can be managed and addressed, rather than what you see in most cases is a situation being escalated when the police get on the scene. And understandably, there has to be law in place, but I just don't think that it should be left up to one individual to make a personal discretion, you know, in a situation. It'll always be like that because, you know, only 1 or 3 or 5 or however many police come on the scene, but those other police officers standing around should be held just as much as accountable if the act that they're making is not right, or if it's unlawful, or however you want to look at it. Everyone should be held accountable to the same thing, and there's a hidden, you know, what is it, the blue code? You know, there's a code, you know, that that is followed.
It needs to be dismantled.
That needs to be addressed, because even though you have to follow a code and that's your brother in arms or sister in arms, if one of them is not doing right, it needs to be addressed. And I think that's the biggest issue, you know, that we're running into since the beginning of time. This is not anything new.
This has been videotaped.
The big thing now is that everything's being televised.
Right.
You know, it's funny how, you know, we've always heard our whole life the revolution will not be televised, but here we are today, and it's the exact opposite of,
the revolution,
you know,
is being
what
televised.
everybody's been saying.
Yeah,
you know?
we're experiencing revolution with this program. We are being a part of history being made right now. And it's very important that these forums continue to take place until some change is in effect. Like you were saying earlier, like laws and all of that, you know, on the governmental level are taken into consideration and they are changed so that we are better represented. So until that change happens, we have to keep on speaking out. We can't remain silent, like Jerome was saying. We have to speak out.
Ms. Marshall is back.
Ms. Marshall, great. Pastor Lisa, are you with us?
She's coming.
Is there an area that you want to comment on, or
Well, it was, I heard the young man talk about being the manager over a predominantly white group, and then I went out. So that was interesting just to hear that transition now.
Jerome, would you mind picking up where you left off so Miss Lisa can chime in once you're done, so she can hear what you were saying?
Yeah, sure. So and I'll try to make it more brief this time. But yeah, ultimately where I was going was, and I had mentioned how I felt a responsibility, right, to kind of speak. I was waiting because of the internal conflict to say, I kind of bring and lead this discussion where they actually may not have interest in this topic, and they feel like it's being, forced upon them. And could that have, impact on me and my status, there as an employee? But ultimately deciding that, this was more important, right? And leading that discussion, I had mentioned, to the group before you had a chance to rejoin, that the irony in it was that it was actually one of the most effective team building sessions that I've ever had at that company, period, even though that actually wasn't the intent. And having real, honest, raw conversations about it was something that was, one, they started to see me as a human, right? Not just a boss. And two, when I actually started sharing some of my personal stories about my interaction with police enforcement, it started to change, right? Because some people are also of the opinion that, hey, if you just, you walk around and your pants are pulled up around your waist and you're not cursing and slurring, doing all of these things, that these things somehow can't happen to you, right? They only happen to people that they deserve to happen to. So they didn't know about times me growing up in Tammany Hill and getting my face, thrown into a police car just because I was walking home from work, right? Or going to my friend's house and 4 cop cars pulling up with guns, and that could have been me when I was just going to see if my friend wanted to play basketball.
That's right.
Right? So it took on, that personal piece where they kind of see, well, okay. And then we talked about the history and sharing some of the history to kind of get them educated on, why it's not random as some have, kind of make it appear to be, right? How do you tie things that kind of happen historically that, sheds a light and illuminates the things that are still kind of going on today, specifically when you talk about systemic oppression and all of the different branches that kind of help support that, right? So that was just a powerful conversation. And then ultimately, I'm not even gonna lie to you, I was surprised when they all told me, hey, we're all going to protest this weekend. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, right? Just because it was, but it was pretty cool to kind of see, and that's where I made the comment earlier saying that you can tell like talking about it wasn't enough for them, right? Like once they kind of understood it and once they kind of grasped on it and, people were in their meeting crying and things like that, they said, well, how do we actually act on this? And that's where I was saying like in my lifetime, specifically in that type of setting, and people who don't look like me, that's why I was like, this feels a little bit different, right? But I just wanted to make them aware that if you don't connect, though, to the history of it, like, you're going to be hoodwinked into saying, all right, well, I did my piece, I protested, this is probably over, right? And think that you never have to deal with this anymore, type of thing, right? So those were some of the things I was speaking to.
Wow, that's breathtaking, and I want to thank you for your bravery, if you will. I think sometimes often we get in positions like you're in, and we kind of melt in with the powers that be, if you will. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable. We certainly don't want to be the one to upset the cart. Thank you for speaking, for being willing to share your truth and certainly your experiences, because too often the other race of people, I'll just call them humans because I just believe that there's one race, that's the human race, but the other humans of the dominant culture really think we're imagining these things or we're making these things up.
Right.
They can't they can't open their minds broad enough to fathom that these things really happen. And so, as a result of that, we get the George Floyd who died, and the actual event shown on television. I think that's the thing that really sticks with most people is it happened and the nation saw it. You know. So thank you for your willingness to just be who you are and share that. So I think that puts us on our way to making things better. Yeah.
I think so too. That's wonderful. Pastor Lisa, we also want to address the area of the coveting 21st century lynching, which is historical, history repeating itself. Reverend Redrick set that up for us, so it might be a good place for us to, chat that around just a little bit. And then I want to, before we separate today, talk about the importance of prayer and cultural awareness, because prayer can touch so many areas that just us talking or just all of our meetings and just us being human beings can go much farther into than we can. You and I know that, but a lot of people don't know that. The importance of prayer is it's very important that we pray about all of this and put these issues on the altar. So before we talk about that, let's talk about the 21st century lynching. And what do we think about that?
Ooh, ooh, that is, for me, there's a couple of articles out about that. For me to really speak on it intelligently, I would honestly say that I need to read more. Yeah, I need to read more before I can have a useful conversation to say more than, yes, there is lynching happening every day. And that's just a general, that's just a general statement. I think we're strung up in the area of employment. We certainly are in the area of economics, housing, in every area where humans should thrive, where everybody else does. African Americans we're lynched. We are, no matter how much education or training we have, no matter our experiences, and we just are. We always seem to be that one, hanging from the tree, not being able to make enough, do enough, get enough, and for God's sake, not being able to get ahead. So that's about all I can say before I do more and more reading.
We can certainly call upon Reverend Redrick because it was her, that concept came from her, and that's what we wanted on the panel discussion topic list, but I'm sure she had to go because she's got to address the senators program. But we can call upon her to hopefully talk a little bit more about that the next time. But
you know what, I'm Paula at its core, right? When I think about that, and not being necessarily, say educated on the nuances, but at its core, right? We're talking about premeditated killings for alleged offenses. Right? And that's exactly what's going on, right? We were talking about vigilante policemen. We're talking about police actually abusing, right, the badge, and doing things for alleged offenses, right? Armada Arbery was allegedly committing a crime jogging in the neighborhood, so vigilante cops took it into their own hands, right? George Floyd allegedly was using counterfeit money, which ultimately, right, exactly, led, right? So, yeah, it is like the same thing, right? When people talk about like slavery, right? Whether it been, indentured servitude, chattel slavery, and all of these things that did the same thing, right? But not necessarily under the same specific term of slavery. It's the same thing with lynching, so to speak. Again, when we're talking about premeditated killings for alleged offenses. So that's where, like, I understand the link. I'm not as educated, again, on like specifically the nuances of how they go about describing that. But when I think about that at its core, that makes a lot of sense to me without even doing any research on that specific term.
Right, right.
Thank you, Jerome.
In my opinion, I think it spreads out beyond, the police brutality, which is our main topic today. But as we've all mentioned and discussed, that, there's been a lot of effort put into a systemic way of not just brutalizing us, but also beating us, mentally, financially, through housing, through education. There are so many streams that have been tainted with the way in which, it's affected us into our modern day way of living, where we're, looked at as differently or compared to on a different level when we start breaking us down by race or by education. You can clearly see that there's a disadvantage in all of those areas. So to me, that's what modern day lynching is. It may not result in, being hung in front of your family and loved ones or out in the community, but being murdered on social media in front of your loved ones and, treated that you are less than or put in a situation where you're not getting the proper resources or have the proper opportunities are the same, ways. It's just modern day, in my opinion. And I had a small video that I wanted to share with everyone, but we already know what the details are as far as all the different effort that has been put in behind redlining and credit scores and, getting the proper education and, home ownership and all the different avenues of being able to better yourself as a U.S. citizen or, a person, living in this life. So modern day lynching, when I hear that term, it's just, they've just brought it into our, everyday of living. It hasn't changed. It's just been something that's been kind of covered up, swept under the rug for a while, and now the rug has just got a whole bunch of stuff up under it where you just can't not address the elephant in the room. You're tripping over it.
Yes, indeed. Well,
You touched on something dangerous there. Specifically because, right, so when I think about one of the aspects of lynching is actually there for display, right? And ultimately, some of the things you just touched on, to a lot of people, they appear invisible. And that's actually, to me, that's actually going to be harder to tackle than police brutality. And one of the reasons why I say this, because right now everyone's talking about like a broadened coalition, right? And I had mentioned me talking to some white folks going to protest. Good luck when it actually comes to the economic part of that. Right? Because a lot of them actually look at it, right? I could go protest for you not to be killed, right? Because I look at that and see that has no negative impact on me.
Right.
But when you start talking about economic equality, hold up.
Time
Time
out.
out. Is
Time
that
out.
going to come at my expense?
Right.
That's right.
You're going too far, William. You're going too far. I was okay when you said, you didn't want to be killed, but now, whoa, wait a minute, right? So yeah,
On equal
absolutely,
education and equal, it's like, whoa.
That was the influence of slavery back in the 1700s, was the economics. That's why.
Would it be okay if I played that video real quick?
Yeah, get it ready. And after we see that video, we're going to talk about the importance of prayer. If you would help me, Pastor Lisa, we're going to talk about the importance of prayer in all of this.
How much time do you got?
Just before we get to that, I want to mention that when you look at
Not much time, I'm not gonna show the video.
one of the main,
We
the
can wrap it
main,
up. We don't have much more time.
the main purpose for that was to instill fear in a people.
Yes.
That had to be us. And when you look at, when you first look at the history of that, they never cared about lynching anybody other than us. It was always us. It was always us. And so as I think of this police brutality, the whole essence, even the economics, and I've just been thinking about it a whole lot lately. But the thing that came to me was, a question is asked, how do we fix that? It's not how do we fix it. We really need to speak up on that and say, how does the ones who invented this, who orchestrated this, how do they fix it?
Right.
It's not on us to fix it. Yes, it's on us to lift a voice and to do the work that we're doing. But when you talk about fixing it, they broke it. They're the one who stole, raped, and killed, and are still doing the same.
Right.
Just raping in another way. But we don't need to fear them when we tell them what the truth is. And the truth is, we don't need to fix it. You guys need to fix it. Yeah, we can tell. Yeah, we can help. We can help, but you really need to bear that responsibility because they're the ones who created this monster.
That's right.
And
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
just that.
Well, William realized that because we're just about to use up all of our time again, we won't show that video,
Right.
but we'll make it available either on our website or our contacts and social media, our platforms. We'll make that video available. But we want to close it out with just a brief discussion of the importance of prayer. And I know that you have been doing a lot of training with University City United Methodist Church. And if you would just offer a little nugget about the importance of prayer in all of this.
Okay, I'm going to try to say this in 3 minutes. Prayer is so necessary for us. It is what when you get to the root of who we are spiritual people, and we are a people of prayer. And we have not to say that other people don't have a connection, because they do, but nobody has our connection with God the way we. And so it comes from deep practices of prayers. We live in prayer. Our grandparents, our great grandparents, remember, always were people of prayer, and they were people who were the God. And so you can, for me, when we pray, we're praying the word of God. We're reminding God of his word. And so that's why we have power. There is power in prayer, because there's power in God's word. And we need to keep doing it.
That's right. And prayer can go places that
we
physically, naturally cannot go.
Reverend, I can't hear you.
I was saying that prayer, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Prayer can go places that we physically and naturally cannot go. We can put everything that we have offered on today at God's feet.
Absolutely.
In a spiritual frame. And it will do stuff that we'll all be standing up looking and wondering, well, how did that happen? I mean, just the essence of us being here today the way we are It's been the Holy Spirit that has guided all of this. And we're going to complete what we have to offer our internet audience on today with that frame of mind. That this is just the beginning of something wonderful and great that God is doing in the lives of Alternative Avenue supporters. And we're going to put the acknowledgments of our sponsors online. I'm going to ask Brother Rashidi to do that for me. And William, if you would speak to all of the formats of social media. Go ahead, William. These are the ones that are available, and the link to follow us with these filmings.
Yeah, you can follow us on all social media platform, AATTA92. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. You can also go to the website at alternativeavenusonline.com to get more information about our services. We are a non-profit organization. We are accepting donations to try to help heal the community with police brutality, financial literacy, being able to teach African tradition through the cultural arts. So please follow us on all social media platforms, AATTA92, and that's pretty much it.
We'll try to get an announcement out when it's going to be available within the week.
Everyone stay safe.
We love you. Thank you for to all of our Zoom participants. Thank you to all of our Alternative Avenues in-house headquarters studio participants. And we look forward to being together with you again. Thank you very much for making this happen.
Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
God bless you.
Stay black.